Welcome to Vision Pros, the show all about spatial computing, visionOS, and getting work done on the Apple Vision Pro. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
They could actually create a virtual hearing space in the Apple Vision Pro because of those spatial audio capabilities and the fidelity that they can use some of those things for. So really interesting to see how they might play out into the types of stores they have and things like that. And also the accessibility, not everybody can get to a store. So if you can take a Vision Pro headset to somebody to have that hearing experience, then that's impressive as well.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Vision Pros. I'm thrilled to be joined once again by Oliver from Contxtual. Oliver was on episode 7 back in January 11th of 2024. We had to record that at the end of December of last year. So that was the episode that launched right after Apple announced the pre-order information for Apple Vision Pro. And in this episode we're about to dive into here, we're going to talk about what this year has been like, looking back at some of the advancements this year and what stuck out to us over the course of this year, but also focus on the enterprise for Apple Vision Pro and visionOS. Oliver has been heavily involved in the user experience side of things for visionOS, and he's attended several conferences out in Australia where he resides, and a big focus currently in this space is the enterprise. So we're going to dive into a lot of enterprise topics. These include things like disaster recovery, orchestration, machine learning, medical and healthcare applications, as well as enhancing hearing in the Vision Pro with some really cool things in the audiology world, as well as different accessibility topics and just lots of different avenues that are being discussed right now in this world. And the enterprise, as many of you may know, have tools that consumers don't have as far as APIs with having access to that camera. So lots of things we dive into in this hour coming up. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so by heading over to visionpros.fm/Patreon and by subscribing to either the Patreon or the Apple Podcasts subscription. You can get both Vision Pros and iPad Pros early. And my great thanks to everyone that supports the show. And if you have not yet left a review in Apple Podcasts, that too would be greatly appreciated. Every review helps others discover the show. With that, here's my discussion with Oliver. Enjoy. Welcome back to the podcast, Oliver.
Thanks for having me back, Tim.
Absolutely. It's been quite the year. So we last spoke, we looked this up before the show, December 22nd, almost a full year. And
that's right.
This episode was released after episode 7, if you want to listen back for newer listeners. Episode 7, it was an episode that was released right after Apple announced when the Vision Pro would be going for pre-order and all that wonderful pricing info. And so it's been
what a year it's been.
It's launched in several places, including Australia, where you're at. Since
yes,
then, you had a summer launch, or I guess winter for you guys, right? Is that how that works?
That's right. Yeah, July. We got a launch in July, so it was our winter. So sort of coming up to 5-6 months ago now.
Yeah, very very exciting, very cool. And we've had a fair bit of different apps launch. It's been probably slower of app launches than other Apple platforms, but some good ones nevertheless. I've been digging this Portal app that just launched for PlayStation from this great third-party developer on the entertainment end of things, of course. But
nice.
A very needed app. It's like why isn't Netflix there? And it's finally here for accessing PlayStation. So yeah.
But I think there's, and we can talk about this later, but I think there's been a lot happening that maybe isn't as visible to everybody because, there's a whole range of stuff that seems to be happening on the enterprise side of things where the apps don't necessarily go through to the App Store.
Yeah, and I'm excited to dive into that because that was your topic at, what event did you Aussie Vision Day, visionOS Day?
Yeah, so it's been a busy year, but at the end of October, I hosted an event in Australia, which was a full day program of Apple Vision Pro, or specifically visionOS. And the aim of that was to really highlight the things that are happening, certainly in the local Australian market, but also more broadly in the enterprise space that we're seeing, that I'm seeing, and to sort of bring that to light so that if everyone goes, oh, look, I haven't got a new app for my Vision Pro, then there seems to be a lot happening in that enterprise space where things are going on. So we had a great day on the 25th of October in Melbourne, so a bit south of where I am now. But then we had the same type of event, but in Sydney last Friday. So again,
Nice.
whole range of different talks. We had people like Jigspace in Melbourne and Fourier in Melbourne, and up in Sydney we had a whole range of others. So trying to broadly look at all the different industries which are starting to play in this space, sort of from industrial sort of energy companies through to medical, and then construction and so on as well.
Yeah, and as I've noticed, there has been a higher than normal hit rate for Australia people on this show, which is just interesting to me that it seems to be an area of interest in that part of the world, which is cool.
Yeah, it's great to see. Look, I think Australia might have punched above its weight on the iPhone and iOS as well, with a whole bunch of games like Firemint and, certainly early on in the days, and apps like Streaks from Quinton. And certainly there's been a bunch of Apple Design Award winners over the years. And in fact, on Friday, while it's New Zealand, we sort of sometimes collect ourselves with New Zealand. So we had Devon Davies over from New Zealand to come and talk about his Apple Design Award winning app Crouton,
Nice. Yeah.
that's across iOS and also visionOS.
Very cool. Yeah. And as far as the launch in general over there, and any thoughts as far as how that all went and you guys, overall?
Yeah, certainly. So I think a lot of, as you said, the developers who were interested and those that were super interested got in early. And I myself flew to Los Angeles and picked up my headset in mid-February, a couple of weeks after launch, and a bunch of us did and brought those devices back. We also had the opportunity that, while at the end of last year of 23, there'd been no Apple Developer Labs for visionOS open in Australia, but quite early on in the year, I think it was, we did get those labs locally. So being in Sydney was a lot easier for us to get a headset on and to try things and to play around. So that's been super beneficial. And so there was a lot of that sort of behind the scenes, little apps getting released. We had an app ready for launch day. We called Day Ahead, and it's what we call an overview of your day's events in Elegant 3D. We wanted to try and rethink what spatial computing was, in the sense of working within a spatial computing environment for long periods of time, where you might be doing your email or your Notion document or your Slack. And so we created this little utility which just visualizes what you've got on that day. It's a glass tube, and within it has colored capsules where your meetings are and has an indicator where you are in your day. So we made sure we had that ready for launch day. And interestingly, we're a user experience consultancy day to day, so we don't have dev capability. One of my team, Shane, has been playing around with a bit of Swift UI. And because we'd had the opportunity to go to the lab in Singapore and then in Sydney, we actually were able to get it live by the launch day in February. And then since that, we sort of repurposed some of those elements into a battery monitor called Battery Level 3D. And we like that because it's far more minimalist than a lava lamp, let's say.
Yes.
But it's a 3D one, right? So no matter where you are, and again, trying to reinforce that with spatial computing, you can move around a space. With a lot of the 2D battery ones, as soon as you move to the side or behind, they disappear. But with ours, of course, it can be anywhere. It can be in the next room, and you can see through the wall and see how your battery's going and things like that. And that was just fun because we were able to repurpose all the elements from the first app and make them into something useful in a sense.
Yeah, and I love the design of these two apps because they don't take up a lot of space. Like, it's funny because we have unlimited space. We could look all around us to have these huge windows, unlimited space. But at the same time, it's really nice to have these nice, thin, little, tiny utility widgets that aren't as attention seeking as others may be, where they want this big window, you know.
Exactly, and there's actually a bit of a story behind it. So, we got quite a bent towards the academic aspects of augmented reality and spatial computing. And there's a professor at Virginia Tech called Doug Bowman, and in his lab look at that things like glanceable everyday AR. And I've done a lot of research around that. And we sort of took some of those elements and we combined them with, actually, for those of you in the audience who might be old enough to remember the original Macintosh, the concept of what were called desk accessories, which when the Mac could only run a single app, these little programs like the calculator and the notepad ran in between the lines of the program of the main application that was running. And we call these things, both the battery level 3D and day ahead, we call them glanceable ambient information visualizations, which sounds overly academic, and it is, but sometimes that's a bit of fun. So we imagine these things like living on a shelf or living next to you that you just sort of glance at and go, oh, right, that's where things are at. And they don't necessarily give you a great depth of detail. But, you know, for us, instead of having one huge calendar window, because we have to remember that even Apple haven't made the calendar app a native application yet for visionOS, that we can just take up a little bit of room in our spatial computing world and glance at these things and get the insight that we probably need. And if we need more from our diary, then we can click on it and it opens up the event itself with more info and stuff like that.
Yeah, very cool. With visionOS 2, the enterprise seems to be a big focus for Apple. Do you get that same reading as far as some of the new APIs that were enabled?
I do, and I'd say even the 1.1. Remember that there was a couple of benefits to. I think it was the
Oh
MDM
yeah,
and
you could
stuff
do device
back
management
then.
was a big one, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I definitely see that that's something that's happening. There's a lot more emphasis and support, but as you say, with 2.0 and so on, where they're really starting to double down. And you know, if we look back in history with both the HoloLens and the Magic Leap, that's not too dissimilar, right? They
Mm-hmm.
sort of went out to start with, and then realized that the consumer market might not have been there as much as they initially expected, and then they really emphasized those enterprise aspects. Unfortunately, both HoloLens and Magic Leap seem to be wrapping up their programs, and Magic Leap's licensing technology to Google, so we might see something from that next year. But I think Apple have also at the same time started to create that richer vein of content. It might be slow, but it's certainly there, right? But I think on the enterprise side, we're certainly seeing signs. Globally, they're hiring for a team in Cupertino, you know, all around this aspect. So they're trying to ensure that they can support the enterprises out there that are doing project for Vision Pro and more importantly for Vision OS more broadly.
Yeah, one of the big ones is enterprise customers can access that camera, which is something every developer really would love to be able
Exactly.
to tie into to be more creative with the applications they make. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's really unique opportunities with both the camera view by itself, but then also having the overlay of the digital content
Mm-hmm.
as well, to being able to see that. Obviously, that sort of remote expert type situation that we've seen on some of the other platforms as being really powerful opportunities for enterprise. And also, you know, talking back to previous as well, is allowing that guest access in a way, you know, the 30-day time period is much more, you know, amenable to handing over a headset for a longer period of time to be used in a work environment, not related to the Apple ID and so on.
For sure. Well, what else since we last spoke did you want to touch on?
Okay. Lots. So,
Yeah.
as I said, I flew to LA and picked up mine in February. And then since then, I think I've done over 170 one-to-one demonstrations of the Apple Vision Pro. Again, you know, as you know, it's the type of device you have to use, and my personal mission seems to be to make sure that we can let as many people know and give a hands-on demonstration to everyone we can. And while the Apple Store is doing them here in Australia and in a range of Apple stores around Australia, those are quite limited into what they can show, and they've got their set process and so on. So I'm trying to find the apps that are most relevant to the people that I'm talking to, whatever industry or commercial orientation they're coming from, to make sure that they're seeing examples. Are they seeing a construction example from some, BIMX, or are they seeing Resolve, or I'm really impressed with some of the stuff that's happening in the store layout. What is it? Spatial delivery. That looks phenomenal. I don't know if you've seen that one, but really interesting to show people, how to think about space on a commercial basis in a different way, and to play with things and play with the opportunities. So lots of one-to-one demos, lots of going out to banks and airlines and grocery companies and all the people that make up the industry here in Australia, again, to try and have them understand what the opportunities are, and to, not that that's going to be a short path, but to get them thinking about it, and at least becoming aware of, that I believe we are in this new era of spatial computing after the mobile computing era that will, dovetail and slowly take over. That they don't need to be ready for it tomorrow, but they need to be aware of those things. And I think certainly since we last talked, we've seen the Snap spectacles come out in Santa Monica in September, and I went over to get those. So I've got a pair of those as well. Obviously, we saw Meta a week later after the Snap glasses present the prototype of the Orion glasses. So again, I think if you look at Meta, you look at Snap, you look at Apple, Google seems to be putting that team together and preparing stuff. If those companies are all looking at spatial computing and putting a lot of money and a lot of effort into that space, I don't think it's an overnight sort of hobby for them. I think it's a serious, future facing approach to computing. So that's been great. And then on the whole events stuff globally, right? Like
for the demos.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, for the demos, can I ask, like, what's been the overall sentiment, and how good have you been about trying to navigate people through? I've done a couple demos, and it can be a challenge to okay, you see this, even though I'm looking at what they're seeing and trying to navigate them to actually use the device,
Yeah. I think there's a couple of key things. So the first one was we always AirPlay it out, and my first thing is to put the headset on myself, obviously, because we've got to put them in guest mode anyway. But to put the headset on myself, uh, show them the AirPlay output, so they're looking at the TV screen or a laptop screen, and just talk them through the real basics of that glance at something or look at something, and then the pinch. And that's been a linguistic thing, because Apple sometimes call it a tap, if you look at their official gestures, but it just didn't work for us. People kept putting a single finger out to poke, and it was like, no, 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 no. So we just stuck with pinch consistently.
Yeah.
And you're pinching, or you're pinching and holding, or you're pinching and dragging, or whatever that might be. So establishing that sort of language first, and just showing them the close button and the grab bar, basically.
Yeah, because everything, it's funny, there is tap, but everything's, you're pinching, and then from that pinch, you do things of dragging it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Apple calls it a tap, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We might see at Dub Dub, maybe they'll update that. But so I'll put it on. I show them the AirPlay. I talk them through the close button underneath the window, a grab bar, and then essentially I talk them through the battery, the headset, describe the cameras, show them how to tighten it, loosen it, and then put it on. And out of all those over 170, only one have I had who said actually before she put it on that she'd previously had any issues with motion sickness. She lasted about 10 minutes, which I thought was still pretty good, right? So we've not seen any issues, with the exception of somebody who's very photosensitive. So we've had the opportunity with a partner organization of ours, Intopia, to actually try the Apple Vision Pro with an individual who had very limited physical interaction. And then also another lady who had very limited, very very low vision eyesight, but she also had a condition of albinism. So that when that bright light goes through for the onboarding, you know how it ratchets up when you're doing the glance. That third one was too bright for her, and unfortunately, she had to take it off.
Oh wow, yeah, yeah. I was wondering with glasses, like at the Apple Store, they can put in your lenses, but for
That's
you,
right.
it's just wear contacts, right?
Yeah, yeah. I've got my lenses in,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously I take them out for other
Yeah, and the
people.
the frustrating thing is if like this person's pretty similar to my lenses, guest mode forces you to take them out. It's so obnoxious. Sure, but
Yeah,
come on, yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
And that's where we guide them to,
yeah,
to the Apple Store or wherever
sure,
it might be. But most of them are so excited that they at least want to try it and see how they go. And because of that 1.3 focal meter focal distance, most of them are pretty happy with the experience
for
regardless.
sure. And have you made any modifications to the headset for comfort, or are you using the standard bands?
I've got the Spigen band on it.
Oh, nice.
Um, And I was going to try a couple of the others, but I just started with that. And to be honest, that does, I sort of wear it for an hour or two a
Mm-hmm.
day, and that does it for me. It does click, like it doesn't, it's not soft material, and that hard
Yeah,
material sometimes doesn't. So I'm kind of interested in the Belkin band just
yeah.
to
I'm
give it a
very
whirl.
just. I'm so curious in that thing. I don't need it because I've got that solo top thing. And it's doing its job, but I hear it's better. It's like better. I like better. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but I haven't taken off the light shield or anything or done any of those super mods. So I'm quite content. And it, I have it on the stand next to my desk here. And so it's really easy just to pop on, right? And I've got that pop on with my left hand, tighten with my right hand, and you're in, right? And it's very, and I've got a lounge chair here in my office as well, so I just sit down on that, and I enjoy that modal change of, instead of I'm at a standing desk at the moment, so having that keyboard, I've got a studio display in front of me, I've got two iPads, I've got my iPhone on in standby mode, and just having that mouse and keyboard and all these screens around me, I just like to go somewhere else and just not have that different type of interaction where I can just use the gestures, use my eyes, and it's just a modal change that I really enjoy.
Do you use your Mac often in the Vision Pro?
I don't, and I think some of it comes back. I've used it a number of times, especially when I'm trying to get content between, but it's not something I'm in a habit of doing, and I think it's partially because of that modal change
Yeah,
that I want to sort of step away from the Mac.
yeah. Because you have
And
like a nice standing desk setup where it's like, yeah, it's a mode, right? Where you're,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And so I like not being in that mode, and sort of it's almost a break. And while I don't have any RSI issues or anything like that, I could imagine, that if I did, just having that break and stepping away from the keyboard and so on, it would make a difference potentially to that as well. So, yeah, I really enjoy it. And I found myself watching some videos. So I was right next to a window the other day. It was just nice to be in the sunshine and I laid down in the sunshine and just, continued on, right? And I think one of the major UX benefits that the Apple Vision Pro has provided is the use of it as a transition device, because I do use a bunch of stuff that, are iPad apps. So I use Notion, I use Slack in the iPad apps. So it's handy to have them there because I would use it far less if I didn't. But of course, the native apps are so much richer to
so much
interact with
better.
and
Yeah.
engage with. Yeah. Have you found a good Mastodon client yet?
I'm just using Ivory from the iPad, even though
Yeah,
there
right.
are like some good native ones, but like it's very powerful to
Yeah.
just use the same app everywhere. And yeah.
I'm I'm using Mona, and
Hmm.
there's some little bits on the reply interaction. So it's just that it's mainly about consumption, but that's kind
Sure.
of the mode that I'm in when I'm
Yeah.
using.
What are some of the other big third party apps that you've discovered over the year that you're enjoying?
The ones on device, I use Keynote a lot, so there's a lot of sort of um, not necessarily practicing, but reviewing and going over things like that. I use all the, there's the keynote and numbers and pages, so a lot of interaction with them. And then a lot of, my big issue actually before I move on is Box. I don't know if you've used Box.com at all, but we use it as a tool for my company. And one of the most frustrating things is that Box is all about, one of the powers of Box on the Mac platform is that you can have that document syncing and you can collaborate in a Keynote document between colleagues, right? And all have it cloud synced. But the Box app on the Apple Vision Pro on visionOS, um, you can only view the app. You can't open from their native app, even though they've got a native app. You can't open up your Keynote in Keynote. So you have to do this sort of really weird transition. So I think there's a couple of those little, workflow issues that we're still
Mm-hmm.
working around. I love using the voice shortcut or the sound shortcuts. I think they're really beneficial. I was actually using them even for home before the new gesture, and I'm just used to the gesture now, so I'm using that. And
You were over
Mastodon is
there
also
clucking and doing all sorts of fun fun things with the
yeah,
voice.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
I think I've still got to bring up my search bar,
Oh, that's a good
and
one.
a
Yeah,
fun, yeah, for Spotlight, and
because search is such an
I've
annoying place still. Even though two, it's buried in Control Center, like under a layer. Even like
exactly.
it should be top level. Like it's because if only for the recommended app list. Like it's so handy to just be able to pop that
Yes,
up. Yeah,
yeah, and that's why I think a sound shortcut makes perfect sense for that, right?
yeah,
Uh, And then I've got a bunch of shortcuts set up more around I forget what it's called. Is it Air? It's called Air something. Where for no, no, it's the little box and you can set up your favorite apps in it. It's just it sits as I can't remember the name. Apologies. But it's really handy to go, okay, I'm going to do the demo and I don't want to have to move, because I'm up to 250 apps or something. I don't want to have to try and move that app right to the front screen just for this demo because it's about construction or something. So I just set that up with the shortcuts to those particular apps. And and the other thing that I use all the time is Siri, right? Like to bring up our apps, to launch most apps, certainly, Mona for Mastodon and things like that. Uh, and then, yeah, I find it really useful. And I don't know whether it's because the microphone is closer to your mouth because of where it's situated on the headset or not, but it seems to have a much higher degree of accuracy of getting things right and better understanding on the Apple Vision Pro than any of my other devices. So that's good.
yeah. And you've reorganized apps as far as
Yes.
yeah, because some people just
Well,
haven't touched it, and it's like I don't understand that at all.
no, that
Yeah,
would frustrate me. But I think, as you mentioned on one of the more recent episodes, I think basically the first screen and some of the second screen, and then beyond that, it's just faster in Siri. I can just
sure.
yeah
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm 3 or 4 pages worth, and then after that, it's all chaos.
yeah yeah
And I mean true chaos because there's just no sorting or anything. It's just like all like
yeah.
yeah. So tell me about some of the other conferences you've been to in
It's
this year.
Yeah, it's been a busy year. So I think I've been to LA 3 times. So the first one that I went to after I had the headset was I was lucky enough to be invited to the world's first visionOS conference, which was in March in Beijing. So that was called Let's visionOS. Had an amazing turnout. I think there was something like 400, 500 people there. Remembering that obviously this device wasn't released in China at the time as well, but there were 65 people in the audience who had their Apple Vision Pro there. And it was a great mix of Western speakers and local speakers. And it went for 2 days and it was a great mix of developers on that side and also design and user experience. So it was a really great community event. It's actually going to be again at the end of February in Shanghai this time, not in Beijing. But it was a really great kickoff, and it was lovely to see that sort of enthusiasm, and to connect with a bunch of visionOS developers like Geordie and Hida and Christian, Christian I've known for many, Diaz known for a while, but we hadn't actually met in person, so he focused on accessibility. Devin Davies was there talking about Crouton. So it was really lovely to meet those people in person and create that network. Then in June, I went along to the big Augmented Reality World Expo, AWE, in Long Beach, back in California. And there was a whole day of visionOS workshop that Raven Zachary ran. So that was a whole full day of talks with people like Jigspace there and the television guys from, what are they called? Sandwich, and so on. So it was a really full day on top of the whole 3 days of the Augmented Reality World Expo. So it was great. And that's where I sort of started to get the idea of, hey, we should do an event in Australia because, again, as you mentioned, we've got a lot of developers down here. And then went to AWE in Asia, so that was in Singapore, and I spoke about how we can utilize context when designing spatial computing experiences, and that was some great stuff there. Then I flew to Santa Monica, got the Snap Spectacles in September, and they're a really different headset, right? Like they're a hardware developer kit, so they've really positioned it like that. They're a set of glasses, so there's no extra cables, there's no external battery, there's no external puck or anything like that. But some of the capability they have is really impressive from the RGB cameras they use for plane detection. So they don't have a LiDAR, but their plane detection is pretty good. It's only a 46-degree field of view, but that's double what their last pair was, and you can still do a lot. And actually, the resolution is pretty impressive. And again, it's a 45-minute battery life. But this is what I think is fascinating is we're starting to see the evolution of what I see the two ends of the hardware that we'll get to. And my view is we'll sort of get an Apple Watch for the eyes, essentially, at that, light pair of glasses. I've got the Meta Ray-Bans,
And the Meta Ray-Bans seem to be a different category where it's more of a camera and a voice assistant and microphone, yeah, it's like
there's no visual component.
Exactly, yeah, and the Snaps seems like there is that, which is interesting.
Yeah, and what I think's interesting about this space is that I think you could do a little bit of augmented reality just with things like map directions and notifications and things like that you don't need a huge field of view for, right?
And you just need an arrow pointing you go this way.
Yeah. And I don't know whether you remember the North glasses. Google bought North a while ago. I think they were out of New York, but they had quite a small, limited field of view, and probably even a monochrome display back then. But I think there is that opportunity down at that sort of glasses end, and then at the high end, you have the full Vision Pro type desktop computing, spatial computing type experience. But the Snap Spectacles are interesting because they're trying to do quite a lot of AR in a glasses form factor. So there was a great interview when Meta announced or showed off, I should say, the Orion glasses. There was a great interview with Boz, the CTO, and what he was saying was that essentially it's great to see all these companies trying really different technology approaches, the silicon carbide and the different lens technologies, because ultimately one of them will win, but at least we're exploring as many opportunities, that divergent thinking around the technology and around the user interface and the broader user experience. I think that's fascinating, especially for somebody in UX, right? Like to see all these different interaction types, the direct manipulation, the indirect manipulation, etc.
And Orion, it feels like it's a decade away at least, right?
Yeah, it's a whiles away, and I think you've got this puck thing, and you've got the wristband. I think is phenomenal. I'm not a huge fan of the Meta business model, but the work that they do in the Reality Labs team there is absolutely phenomenal. And I think that wristband, the EMG wristband that they were showing off there, I think is amazing.
The wristband, Is I'm just looking at it. It seems like if Apple was to do something, they'd just add that to the Apple Watch, right? Or is there more sensors and you could cram in one?
From what I understand, there probably is, but I think Apple are doing a lot with what you can do with pinch, one-handed use of the
Mm-hmm.
Apple Watch, right?
Totally.
And is that close enough? My expectation is that if they evolve that over the next couple of years, it probably is.
Yeah.
And of course, instead of a puck, you've got an iPhone, right? So,
Yeah. The main difference is you probably don't want to kill your iPhone battery for your headset. Yeah.
that's right. But
Yeah.
again, if it's an Apple Watch for the eyes, it's not trying to run full scale applications and
True.
do
Oh, yeah.
crazy
That's
things,
true.
right?
Yeah, the
It's
Vision
just
Pro is very
notifications and
power
directions
hungry,
and
but perhaps less. Yeah. For that
yeah,
class.
and to me, that's there's a lot of talk about how these devices might meet in the middle, but I actually don't see
Because you lose the best of both worlds there, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can't have a full, enclosed, fully immersive experience on a pair of glasses. You've just got too much light coming in, and the battery
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't work, and it'd be too
Yeah.
battery hungry and things.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's the exciting time we live in, right? Like, is
It is.
to
Yeah.
watch all this stuff evolve.
Yeah. Like early days of Apple Watch, every update was this huge revolution. Like, oh, it's got GPS now. Oh, it's got cellular now. How they do that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep. Yep.
yeah. Every year was
Yeah.
something big. Yeah. But I
And
imagine in this space it'll be longer time distances between these big steps because it is such a. The Apple Watch seemed crazy at the time, but it was just miniaturized iPhone. This is like I don't know, something that's very hard to do. Let's just say, yeah.
yes. Yeah, but they've come a long way, and I think they've learnt a lot through that process as well, right? That they're
Yeah, for
going to
sure.
directly leverage that knowledge and potentially put in.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, anything else before we get to enterprise?
The spatial personas aspect I'm really enjoying as well. So, two of the people, Tim from Canada and Christian from Berlin, and another
Mm-hmm.
friend Josh in the US, we have a conversation now every 2 weeks, and we just, jump in, do the spatial personas thing. It just feels very natural now, and it's more about catching up and seeing what the latest beta release is, and sharing content and showing what we're working on, or having chats about what conferences are coming up and things like that. But that's become a key, experience that I think we're going to see a lot more being leveraged, and we'll get to this with enterprise, obviously, but even socially, with things like Table Kit and the gaming aspect around that in the shared space, I think is going to be super powerful. Obviously, there's the chicken egg situation of, well, people need to have a headset to play the games, and then if more games, more people will get a headset. Well, people are probably aren't going to buy a $3,500 headset for games, but I think to have that there now and to allow people to create those shared and collaborative experiences is a great foundational layer for a whole bunch of experiences that we'll use into the future.
Yeah, we did hear that report from Bloomberg that they may be partnering with Sony, which is very exciting, and we might get these Sense controllers. I'm holding one in my hand, working on the Vision Pro, so that'll be great for games. As you said, people won't buy it for gaming; they'd probably just buy the PSVR 2 or a Meta Quest 3 because those are gaming headsets. But certainly a nice addition, and certainly a nice thing for Vision Pro to play around with, as I'm sure Apple will eventually release lower end versions that may be more appealing on that kind of market.
Yeah, sure. And again, it's just trying to add things to the platform to give people another reason, right? And cumulatively, if I can I can have this massive screen in front of me, this ultra wide screen, and use my Mac to do these things, and then I can grab that controller and play games in it, and all those things just build up. Oh, I can use my iPad app. Oh, I can use this native app. Yeah,
again, it's a big deal because you can use a dual sense or an Xbox controller, but you're just mapping buttons, and most of the apps don't even touch vibration for that controller. And with the Sense controllers, it's not just mapping buttons; it's knowing where that controller is, and it
That
rotationally
spatial
as well.
element.
It's
Yeah.
it's very different as far as supporting that. It takes a lot more engineering work, I think, on Apple's end to make that a good experience, and hopefully they do that. And this will be the first time as a PSVR 2 owner, it's very obnoxious on Sony's end. They still don't sell those controllers if you break yours. You have to like go through the long process of going through a warranty repair. Wow. They're only sold. Yeah, they're only sold bundled with the PSVR 2 headset. It's the wildest thing in the world that they don't offer those. Yeah, so this will hopefully this will force Sony's hand to let us buy replacement controllers if they're going to sell it for Apple Vision Pro.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, anyways. Spatial personas to me have been remarkable. Like they're so good. I wish I had more, excuses to use it because I every time I use it, it's like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, the problem that we've hit is that there's a 5-person limit. So I'm actually in the process of starting up multiple different groups because there's that group and then there's another group that's forming and then we've got another group and it's just like we can't get you all together. So end up having lots of conversations, but that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, that I've not hit the 5-person limit. That's a good problem to have. I wonder when they'll. Yeah, how long that limit will be there. It's like, if everyone's on the M5 headset, you can all be at 10 people now or something.
Great question. Yeah. I wonder where the limitation is, what the constraint is.
Right, exactly, yeah. Anything else from this past year? Anything that you're surprised about from the pre-launch status of things to, this is something I'm actually finding useful here as a released product?
Yeah. I think I've really fallen into that rhythm of working in it. I think I'm surprised. We'll talk about this event in a moment, but just that people haven't tried it, especially people who I thought were sort of within the industry or so and so on. I was at a different event in Perth last Monday, and there were a bunch of people there in the XR community who hadn't tried it. So I think, and were some of them were, oh, okay, I'll give it a go, and then they took it off and they're like, oh wow, that was better than I expected it would be. So it's just that tricky type of product, right? That you've got to put it on, you've got to have everything set up for you or somebody to walk you through it, and that's just going to take time to get out into the market and
for sure.
Evolve.
Yeah. Well, what else before Enterprise, if anything?
Well, these events we've had, so I hosted this one in Melbourne, and we had a range of talks. So they weren't all enterprise, but one of them was presented by Apple, and it was all about accessibility on Apple Vision Pro. So I've been really intrigued by that, and I think there's a huge opportunity there. And Apple talk about, Apple Vision Pro is one of the first devices, or the first device to really have accessibility baked in from the very start, right? And they're now up to 40 years of accessibility from the Macintosh, well, even prior to the Macintosh. But those accessibility enhancements, even things like VoiceOver on the iPhone, came post-release and the Apple Watch as well. Whereas the Vision Pro actually has a whole bunch of accessibility functionality that has been absolutely designed in from the start. Not only vision and physical and motor and hearing, but also the cognitive aspects. And I think that's intriguing because it's such a personal device. And people can configure their work environments and the way they view content or engage with content in very specific ways to them that can enable things like ADHD or enable them to interact with technology in a way that's maybe more appropriate for them and their needs and their preferred ways of interacting. So I think there's a lot there that will only come out over time. And as I mentioned, we're at the very start of doing research with people who would like to try the Vision Pro with a range of diverse needs. And so we can better understand how they use it, how they want it, if they want to use it, how they might use it and so on. But even simple things of, where people in an office might need to use a screen reader, but they don't want to sit, an inch away from their screen and have supersized big text. if they've got the Vision Pro on, nobody knows how big the text is, right? Like they can have it as big as they want. They've got a much bigger screen real estate, to put that text on and things like that. So I think there's a whole bunch of things that will enable that. And again, that speaks again with any sort of inclusive design that those opportunities can be leveraged by everybody. So, the ability to put content in and spatially anchor content at the size, the resolution, all those sorts of things that make it comfortable and make it easier to interact with for you is great.
Yeah. I'm curious if visionOS 3 will bring the hearing aid support from AirPods Pro into Vision Pro, because I think currently it has to be connected to your iPhone for that functionality to work, which seems like at some point that would be a nice thing to bring over to visionOS, where if you're connected there, it would also do those same audio adjustments to the different content you're watching, and also the people around you where you can hear them better and whatnot. Because I mean, visionOS is all about your senses, like your vision and your audio landscape as well. Yeah,
exactly.
Have you tried out the black and white mode, the grayscale mode of turning all of your cameras from visionOS in the grayscale?
No,
it's a fun experience. I mean, I don't need it, but it's like it's cool to just to go in accessibility, turn on grayscale, and you're basically experiencing the world as someone that's colorblind, with all the colors blind. I know there's some people that are colorblind and they don't see certain colors well, but this is like, what's it like to experience the world in grayscale? Because your pass-through camera turns that way, and the apps are that way. Yeah, it's cool.
And going even further than that, things like door detection and so on, right? So, can this device for low vision, or can it assist us in other ways because Apple has that technology? Actually, I think it has door detection built in already.
I think so.
It's back to a bunch of the stuff that's already in there. So
yeah. As far as ADHD, you mentioned, what are some of the things Apple mentioned that can make the world less distracting, I guess?
I think the opportunity to define your own environment, a work environment, and to immerse yourself in a way that is appropriate. Some of the light ones, where you can go to summer light and the winter light, might just tone down some of the visual things around you and so on. Or obviously full immersion if you can find something like the Lake Varga one's pretty chill.
Yeah, it is interesting.
I spend most of my time in the Bora Bora one.
Yeah, the Vision Pro definitely. I think it inspires. Like, let me watch a full movie without my phone that I'm just constantly distracted with and not enjoying either. Like, definitely. Yeah, for people with ADHD, I think there is something to that where it's like, oh, this helps me focus in on this one task.
Yeah. And they have that single app experience almost as well to just, I think that helps everybody.
Exactly.
Sometimes I had to get this email done the other day, and I was just distracted by everything around me, and I just went and sat down and picked up the keyboard and sat in a chair and just went to Bora Bora and just pulled up the email in front of me, and it was gold.
Yeah. One of the talks at that event was about machine learning experiences, and noticeably absent from visionOS's Apple Intelligence, but this is machine learning. What can be done in Vision Pro as far as machine learning that you found interesting from that one?
Yeah, so we had James Dale from Friday Technologies, based in Melbourne, and James actually used to be on the ML team at Apple. So he was in Cupertino, working in Cupertino, came back to Australia and started up a consultancy. And what was fascinating was in the first talk that James did for us in Melbourne on the 25th of October, he sort of showcased some of the things he could be doing with machine learning. So he did this generative model where he asked for 3 words from the audience to use as a prompt to generate this 3D asset in front of us. And he wasn't using just the headset there, But when he did it again in Sydney, he'd enhanced it, and he's sort of turning it into an app now. So it's almost like the conference has generated an app. But that's a really impressive one. So he's looking at what models make sense to run on the Apple Vision Pro on the hardware itself, and where it's smart to offload some of that. Obviously, with time, you can do simple things quite easily on the headset, but once you start to get up, you're better off offloading rather than taking too much time for the headset to do it. So having that whole discussion and thinking through of where that line is really fascinating, and the privacy aspects and accessibility and so on around that as well.
Yeah. And then as we were just talking about hearing, I totally forgot live captioning is already in visionOS. That's something I've not played around with, but perfect place for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we had, so on Friday we had Nikki Chong White, who's from the National Acoustic Laboratory here in Australia, and what she showed off was this new enhancing hearing experience with Vision Pro with an app called Now Scribe, and it's just a proof of concept at the moment. But essentially, they've gone a step further than that functionality. And if everyone's got, like, let's say everybody's around a meeting table and has an iPhone in front of them, that acts as a speaker, but also can separate then the different speakers and can put the speech from each speaker above their head in a bubble and show you when they're talking or not talking and so on. So it's really interesting to see that element of being able to use the technology in that way. But they're also looking at how they could potentially, instead of having a physical hearing space, how they might be able to create, which is in a building, like in their stores around the world. Instead of doing that, they could actually create a virtual hearing space in the Apple Vision Pro because of those spatial audio capabilities and the fidelity that they can use some of those things for. So really interesting to see how they might play out into the types of stores they have and things like that, and also the accessibility. Not everybody can get to a store, so if you can take a Vision Pro headset to somebody to have that hearing experience, then that's impressive as well.
Yeah. As far as the medical world and healthcare, what kind of stuff was shared in that realm?
So we had Melissa Randolph, from. It's an interesting organisation. So they're an Equinox VC organisation, and then they've got a number of brands and sort of companies within that, of which one is LabFlow. And Melissa showed off 4 use cases across sort of different medical lab. So getting lab samples in, being able to scan. So they've got the enterprise API enabled, so they can scan a code on a lab sample, get up the information about that lab sample. They could look at a box of lab samples and see, okay, when was it shipped? Is there any Internet of Things data around that? So temperature fluctuations that sample might have experienced along its way, things like that. They had a very bedside type experience of pulling up patient records and so on for a doctor going around the ward. And they also had an in-surgery experience that was fascinating, because she talked about the monitors that, if you're doing a laparoscopy, I don't know the technical terms for these medical things, but basically the camera going down with the tools into the something, and it all looked very messy and not very pretty, but it was all up on screen. And she was saying, look, you've got to move a physical monitor in relation to that person around the surgery, the surgery, right? Like, whereas with the Vision Pro, you can obviously have a number of screens, all where they directly make sense, that are contextually located and are in a far more comfortable place, so that the surgeon doesn't have to keep turning back to wherever that monitor is located, because it's not easy to move those things compared to, grabbing a grab handle on the bottom of a window and just moving it closer, moving it further away. Again, in a totally sterile situation. So that was fascinating to look at those surgeries, and she especially talked about the future of more robotic surgeries as well, guidance around that sort of thing as well, and so that was a lot of fun. and even through to lab maintenance type of thing, being aware of different issues with different laboratory equipment setups and so on. So that was really interesting. And the other one that I noticed recently, which is a dental one, was this guy was using this device called a prime scan, I think it is. The dentists out there might know, but he was a dentist. He had the patient in the dental chair, and he would put this device into their mouth and run it around the outside and then the inside of their teeth, and it would bring up a live, immediate scan of that whole of that the teeth, right, of the top jaw and then the bottom jaw, or set of teeth, I suppose you call them. And that was really interesting. And I was thinking, okay, well, at the moment it's a 2D scan, but you could imagine it being produced into a 3D model, right in front of him, and being able to zoom in and so on. So I think there's some fascinating stuff there around the scrub technician stuff that we've seen before. And yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting space. And I know, from the conference organisers in China, that the medical area in China with the Apple Vision Pro is of great interest.
That's, yeah, very cool. I hate going to the dentist, but as we all do.
I don't think anyone likes going to the dentist.
No, but that sounds very cool, for sure.
Yeah. And it was that use of, a technology that has a 3D output, that the 3D output really isn't used properly yet. Like if you're showing a 3D image on a 2D screen, it sort of feels like you're not quite there. So that seems like to be one of those future opportunities, right?
Yeah, I wonder if getting braces, you'll be able to visualize, that stuff better than we had in the past, your teeth moving and shifting. Yeah. And then another one that caught me on in the talk list here is disaster relief orchestration. Like a hurricane hits and Vision Pro's like aiding in the recovery of that city.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites. I think it's that classic opportunity to show a whole range of different content types, and really shows the strengths of the Vision Pro. So this was presented by Rod Zampera from Telstra Purple, who are a consultancy attached to the biggest telco here in Australia. And so they were working with their client, Energy Queensland, to look at environmental occurrences like flooding or fires, which happen a lot here in Australia, and looking at sort of these opportunities to enable what they call field intelligence officers to orchestrate these disaster recovery operations. So, there's the classic topographical map, the 3D map of the landscape in front of them, that they could obviously collaborate around and discuss. And then they had drone footage on some screens coming in, a lot that might have been happening live, right? And then they might have had some statistics, or, what area of this was being flooded or was fire affected. And then they could bring in a model of, the asset that might have been a electricity hub or something like that, and bring that to life in these experiences as well. So it was really interesting. They'd gone through a whole, design thinking process around what difference, and what I really loved about Rod's presentation, he kept asking, could we just make this an iPad app? Like, why is this on Vision Pro? And really kept going back to that to go, no, it needs to be significantly different. What is the benefit to this person trying to do their job? And so there was a really nice presentation and exploration of both the outcome and the design process that they used to get there. So it was really good.
Did it use real world examples like a recent disaster, or was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a proof of concept,
sure.
But obviously they're looking at taking it further. But it was using drone footage, and they'd mapped a particular area, and they got and that was kind of interesting because in one of the earlier versions, Rod talked about how they found a solar panel across the road from the office, and they could find a 3D model of that solar. So they were prototyping it with things that they had, so that they could show that, this is what the footage might look like, and this is you're having a FaceTime call or a spatial personas call in this thing. How would that present? But that was the great thing of showing that prototyping process of bringing it to life and then ultimately bring the real content in.
Nice. Yeah. And what did your talk kind of focus on in particular there?
So mine was a sort of trying to set the scene and talk about those eras of computing of, mainframe to PC to GUI to mobile, and then that we're now at this inflection point for spatial computing, and trying to set the scene
Mm-hmm.
for the day around that. Talking about those UX opportunities of the Apple Vision Pro that I think makes it a unique headset. Those transition elements that I talked about before, of being able to use the iPad apps and just get shit done, right? Like you can just do stuff.
Yeah.
Then obviously things like it being the Apple ecosystem popping up straight away, all your content's there, right? As soon as you connect the devices, the new user interface types that you can bring about that we haven't seen, or we've seen not done well enough in other headsets. And then, of course, the gestural interaction and the gaze to the degree that it is. It's so much better than those other headsets. So just really highlighting those strengths, and of course, using our little app Day Ahead as an example of, how to rethink designing for the spatial computing workspace as opposed to popping a headset on, going into an app, coming out of the app, taking the headset off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, anything else from the conference or any other enterprise stuff in general that we haven't touched on yet?
I think one of the standouts from the October event, because it was in Melbourne, was the Jigspace guys. So
Yeah.
we had Sam from Jigspace, who's the chief product officer, and what was great about his talk was it wasn't just him talking about Jigspace as a platform, but they actually brought along a client to talk about how they use it with their clients. So, it was sort of showing this is real. There are real clients using this day to day. He talked about one particular client where, they would go to a trade show for magazine printers or newspaper printers, these massive printers, where it costs them, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to disassemble this printer, put it on a truck, get it to the expo, the convention, reassemble it, show it to people as this big block of stuff. Whereas now they just need to take a couple of headsets, and those people can walk through the machine. They can blow the machine apart. They can show them how it actually works, not just standing on the outside. So, they really talked about emphasized the ROI aspect of why this is so more cost effective, and the things that they can do that they can't do. They do a lot of mechanical drawing and how these bits fit together and things like that. So I think that was a really interesting one. And the great thing that they did was they did a collaborative session demo in the room. So they were both together having this collaboration over this particular model, using custom gestures and using these sort of instructional design things. So again, one of the things I really wanted the speakers at these events to do was to show it in headset, right? This isn't theoretical. This isn't, maybe this will look good in the future. It's like, no, this is stuff that we're doing now. And I've had one of the most interesting things I think is I've had the opportunity, and obviously we could fill up a day easily with these speakers, but I've also had the opportunity to hear about a bunch of enterprise apps that are happening that aren't ready to be talked about yet as well, and there's a lot of activity happening. And then there was also, the spatial storytelling side from Foria as well, which are creating some really beautiful experiences, but far less on the enterprise side of things.
With Jigspace, it's just great to hear like it didn't just launch and was forgotten about like so many launch apps could be, where it's just like we're gonna do this to be there at launch, and then what's the matter? But it sounds like they're embracing it, and it's a part of their business in a big way.
Yeah, and they were really pushing the collaborative aspect. While Apple is certainly putting that in, they were really pushing the boundaries of that early because they understand how important it is.
And they're doing that over a FaceTime call with spatial personas, or?
Yes.
Okay. and they can
But
share
I think
play.
they've got their own custom templates, and
Okay.
there was some aspects there, certainly in the early days, where they were sort of pushing it a bit further than Apple had done, is my understanding.
And they can share play parts of the app
Assets,
assets. Okay.
3D, the assets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
With the instructional information to guide them through and
Yeah.
animate and so on. So it goes far beyond what a USDZ can do, right?
Yeah. No, it's a powerful app. I've only just played around with it, but I know, it's got real utility.
Yeah. So that was good. And then what else? Oh, then this time in Sydney, Apple also presented how to design creative and functional visionOS apps. So that was a new addition to the Sydney version, and really great for the audience, because I think with this event, I've tried to, traditionally Apple's events have been more developer focused, we might say. Whereas these events that I've run, I've tried to orientate them more around products, like product owners, because I think they're the people who are going to be the decision makers in a lot of this, to go, hey, what are our customer needs and behaviors? How might we best address those with visionOS or an Apple Vision Pro type device? So product owners, obviously UX, UI designers and researchers, and also the more that business side. So I think we only had about 20% developers, both from iOS backgrounds and VR backgrounds. And then the others were sort of probably about 40% from UX, UI product, and then others from the business side of things. So I think that was really good to see, because they're probably the people that we need to make most aware of this new device and new opportunities.
For sure. Well, anything else before we wrap it up?
Not from me, but I think. What about you? What's some of the most interesting stuff you've seen in the last couple of weeks since you did your last one?
I mean, as I spoke about, my most exciting thing personally was the Portal app for PlayStation.
Yes.
That is because it's the app that in February. That's the first thing I looked for. How do I get my PS5 into my Vision Pro? And Sony did not check that checkbox. It was such a sad moment, and the other third party offering was just not a good experience. Mirror Play, I think it was called. There's not good streaming. Sure. It's an iPad app that just didn't work well in the headset. And for someone to very thoughtfully and lovingly craft this app for the, it was such a huge deal. And I've been using it and had long sessions in it. It's like, it holds up. It looks great. The update that came out last night added full haptics to the controller, so it has adaptive triggers, and the gyroscope works in the controller, and the touchpad. Like, these are features that even Sony's iOS app don't support. So if you want haptics, it doesn't do it over Bluetooth. You need to plug into your iPhone or iPad over USB-C for the full haptics and that stuff to even work. So this developer is doing stuff that even Sony has not yet done with their app.
That's
which
amazing.
Is wild. I mean, you can tell this is someone that wants the same thing I want. They want their PlayStation 5 and the headset and have a good experience there, and it's cool to see. So that's been my favorite thing within the past week or so to pop up. But it is fun looking at it wasn't showing up in the recent app list. I was just, as I searched for PlayStation every once in a while to see what is there anything new that might be there, and it showed up there. But yeah, the recent app list is a fun place to just like every couple weeks, like, oh, that's pretty cool. Spatial delivery you're talking about, that there's some very cool things just popping up every now and then. The thing that caught my eye, they've been on the podcast recently, is the development world are developing tools.
Interestingly, when Apple did the talk the other day in Cupertino, the sort of full day event, I noticed they were talking about Splime a bit more, which is a 3D tool. So we've been using that a bit in the past, but look, if it's on Apple's radar, then it's that's interesting to know.
Yeah, but but Details Pro and Shader Vision were both kind of released around the same time, and both of those are big in the as far as development, Details Pro allowing you to craft your UI within the Vision Pro and send that over the Xcode on the Mac, and Shader Vision doing full shader development within the headset, and like really cool to see like these kind of heavy duty apps are getting worked on the headset be created, and so it's fun to see.
To design and develop in the headset will be the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
For 3D especially.
For sure, yeah.
And then any upcoming events that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, but then again, I have not attended events because I don't have a travel budget and stuff like that. Unless it's in Boston, I'm not going to be able to make it. Which maybe Boston will eventually have events. Which would
you'll have to gather us all up there. You'll have to create something to get us all up there.
That would be amazing. Yeah,
get the conference to come to you.
Absolutely, that'd be great. Yeah. But yeah, it's been fun. Yeah, just digging in and seeing as the new stuff comes up, what is coming up, and it's not as it's not a graveyard. There's a lot of fun stuff happening here, so it's cool to see.
Yeah, no, especially looking forward to WWDC next year, and to see how we're going to go. Where they're going to push this platform. I think that'll be really exciting, and then potentially 2026. Do we think 2026 will get a new device? Or
I would think so. And it is wild. We're already halfway to the next major OS unveiling, right? It's December. It'll be January before. Yeah, so we're like 6 months away from like, oh, will Apple finally port all of their iPad apps over that were so missing last time around?
There are some critical ones, yes, that they should definitely be working on. So fingers crossed.
And we'll see. This will be the first big update. Headset's been the wild for. So they've had more feedback from users versus version 2, which is more. This is what we should have shipped in version 1 almost, and version 3 will be. We've had some feedback from actual users, and here's some of that incorporated.
Through evolution.
Yeah. And the next headset, so far we're just hearing an M5 version of the same design, which, make it faster and more responsive and Apple Intelligence and all that good stuff. But, so, I'm curious.
Or will we get a Vision Air device before that?
Yeah, and that's the question, right? And what does that lower cost one look like? How much sacrifice is there in the screen technology? Is it ruin the thing that makes it great? Or
I think it'll be a whole different use case. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, for sure. Where can folks follow you online and try out your 2 apps that we talked about earlier?
I am on Mastodon as Oliver W at mastodon.social. LinkedIn is probably the key place to find me, which is search for Oliver Weidlich, so OLIVERWEIDLICH, and then Contxtual / which is CONTXTU.AL / spatial computing is where all our stuff lives, and including the apps. But if you search on the visionOS App Store for Day Ahead or for Battery Level 3D, then you should find those 2 there.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Oliver, for your time. It's been great catching up, and we'll see the next year what it'll bring as well.
That's right. We might have to turn this into an annual event.
Yeah, December. Right. Yeah.
Pre-Christmas.
Yes. Well, that's my discussion with Oliver. My thanks to Oliver for his time recording. My thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. Make sure to check out his apps, Day Ahead and Battery Level 3D, in the visionOS App Store if you have not yet already. As a reminder, you can support the podcast over at visionpros.fm/Patreon. My great thanks to everyone that supports the show. With that, I'll talk with everyone again real soon.